Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your presence. And I am thankful that you were able to join today's Inner Audit Live experience. Today, we will be focused on performance under pressure, specifically when pressure hits and it puts us into what I call a proving pattern. So today, you will learn some techniques and you will hear some stories that are rooted in the framework, the Inner Audit, that are designed to help you navigate that experience of getting stuck in pressure and how that can show up in a multitude of ways. But most importantly, how do you get unstuck? And how do we get out of these survival mode states so that we can actually show up with the most mental clarity, the most emotional clarity, and the most, just our most authentic and brightest self. So I appreciate you guys being here today. And I want to just start by introducing myself for those that don't know me. My name is Shawntà Hooks. I am a former CPA and risk management executive. I spent 20 years working in risk management. And for most of my career, I was very good at being the person that people could count on. I am also the oldest daughter in my family. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. What up, though? Which is how we greet people in Detroit. Feel free to drop me a what up, though, in the chat so I know that you're here with me. But being the oldest person in my family, the oldest child, as well as being someone that grew up in the 80s and 90s in Detroit, I am an older millennial. So that means that I have a high risk of getting stuck in certain specific patterns, especially when pressure hits. And at some point in my life, after about 18 years of working in risk management, and specifically when I was promoted to become the automation strategist at Synchrony Financial, a Fortune 200 bank, that job put me in a position where it really challenged how I saw myself. It challenged my self-worth, and it challenged my ability to navigate pressure in such a way that I didn't lose myself. And losing myself for me often means taking things personal, becoming more judgmental, making a lot of assumptions, and avoiding sometimes the hard conversations, or sometimes overreacting to difficult situations. And that has shown up, in so many areas of my life. But it was when I started to develop meditation as a lifestyle habit back in about 2018 that started to shift. And I started to understand how allowing myself to pause in these moments where pressure hits, and first and foremost, understand that I can't always change my environment. Pressure is a part of life. It's a part of physics. It's a part of everything that we are, involved in. And depending on the type of work that you do, maybe you work in sales, maybe you work in HR, maybe you work in the hospitality industry. For you, pressure shows up some specific ways in the work that you do. And it also shows up in our personal lives, right? Pressure shows up in our romantic relationships. It shows up in our parental relationships, friendships, everywhere. And it's not avoidable. And so what meditation and mindfulness really taught me was how to experience pressure and experience what I call the walls of pressure, where I have a risk of being stuck on the walls of either speeding up and being anxious or shutting down. And once I actually recognized that there is something that can be done, apparently, that can interrupt that pattern, interrupt the default behavior, which may say, go ahead and send that 10-page email. Go ahead and be petty. Go ahead and shut down. Go ahead and avoid the conversation. That voice that's telling me to do those things. Mindfulness gave me space to pause, recognize that voice, and then choose whether or not to listen to that voice. And the more I activated that space of presence and that space of pausing, the more I started to really change my behavior, change my choices. And ultimately, it changed my career. After that experience of, feeling stuck for about a year and a half in that job, and then developing mindfulness as a lifestyle habit, I ended up getting promoted. I ended up, getting a job that really served, my authentic expression in bigger ways. I was able to communicate my needs more efficiently, effectively. I was able to spend less time stuck in taking things personal and making assumptions. And most importantly, I was able to open up myself and avail myself to actually do this work, the work that lights me up the most, which is teaching people how to actually navigate pressure without losing themselves, and specifically without losing their decision clarity. So before I, kind of get into the framework, I want to just tell a little story. So once upon a time, not long ago, I, was working in corporate America, and like many of us, I got a performance review. And the performance review wasn't terrible. It was a decent performance review. There were, a lot of things that, my manager said I did right. And then as I read it, I noticed that there were a couple things that she said I needed to improve on. And of course, my focus, my attention went straight to what I saw as negative. It went straight to the developmental feedback. And this wasn't, I wasn't like a freshman at work, right? This was like, 10 years into my career. And it wasn't the first time that I responded that way, though, to, that the physical reaction of seeing feedback and seeing something that's painting me as less than perfect because I'm the person that likes to get things right. It wasn't the first time, but I remember specifically in that moment with this particular performance review, I did what I used to kind of have a habit of doing. My default mode was to build a case, to prove my manager wrong, to let her know that, sure, some of that might be true, but here's the real story. Here's the nuance. Here's the receipts. And so I drafted a long email. I had all my points ready for our meeting. I went into the meeting, really hedged for the worst. And I immediately entered that meeting defensive. And it was very clear. And that set the tone for the rest of the meeting, which ultimately ended up being combative. It ended up, sort of painting myself in a negative light with my manager, with my manager. It ended up sowing a seed of a reputation that didn't actually reflect, my accurate persona as a leader in this role. And it sent me down a path that I had to actually kind of spiral myself out of eventually. And I did, right? And these moments happen in our lives. But as I think about that experience of just receiving that feedback that was delivered to me, not in an offensive way, I can look back and say feedback wasn't disrespectful. It wasn't even untrue. I mean, sure, some aspects of it could have been debatable, but there wasn't anything out of line about it. Everything about my reaction was a reflection of my perception. And then that reaction ended up being, or my behavior ended up being a result of that perception, which was taking it personal, making assumptions, not choosing to pause and actually do something to change my energy before I decided to respond. I'd made the mistake that I made a lot before I developed mindfulness as a lifestyle habit. I reacted and responded before I paused. And, it's interesting because that particular job, this is when I was working for an insurance company. I had just became a compliance manager. This was my first management role. I was managing like 18 people. And I ended up like eventually after like a year and a half in that role, I had my son. And when I came back from maternity leave, I actually ended up getting laid off or fired because that scenario was one of a lot of scenarios that really put me at odds with my management team. And so when it came time to optimize, who was on the chopping block? Me. Now, it did happen while I was on maternity leave, and it was certainly read as, in my eyes, FMLA discrimination. And so I did the things that that I would do, right? In that case, I did get defensive. I did stand up for myself. I was able to negotiate the severance and all those things. But reflecting back, the mature version of me now knows that I played a role in that. Not to say that anything should have been different. Right. I'm glad that I was actually, taken out of that role. I didn't vibe as well with the management team. I ended up getting another job that put me in position to do the work that I'm doing now. So I have no regrets and I wouldn't change anything except for my response in those moments when pressure hit me. And instead of pausing, I decided to build a case. Right. And write, pages and pages of defense like I'm a lawyer litigating myself. And I wish I had what I have now. Right. I wish I had something that could show me what pressure does to my perception, how it actually can lock me into one of three, points, which is either speeding up, shutting down, or hopefully remaining steady. And I'm going to show this image. This is an image that kind of shows you visually what it looks like when we're locked into presence. And so what you're seeing right now is a dashboard that I provide in my experiences for organizations and individuals as after you take the assessment, the pattern intelligence assessment. And this visual is a reflection of what's in the report. It shows you, first and foremost, what is your regulation state? Where are you on the dial of shutting down and speeding up under pressure? And shutting down, and sometimes, and maybe in the chat, drop in the chat what your default reaction is. Is it to shut down? Meaning, is it to be avoidant? Is it to avoid the hard conversation? Is it to become passive aggressive? Is it to, sort of withdraw? Or are you more like me? And I can be both. Where in that case of the negative feedback, are you someone that gets anxious, that speeds up, that certainly is ready to defend and ready to challenge and ready to litigate? Where are you on the spectrum? Just drop that in the chat, right? Which one reflects you, shut down or speed up? And if it's steady, say steady, right? If you're already there, you already know, you know how to take your deep breaths, you know how to regulate 100% of the time, you know what to do, put that in there as well. But really what I'm asking is, what is your default mode when you're more in the energy that is a reflection of you not being steady, right? Because we're always navigating one of these three states, right? Most of us we're shuffling in and out of either shutting down, speeding up, or being steady. The goal of the work I do is to help you minimize the amount of time you spend on these walls of pressure in shutdown mode or in speed up mode, to minimize or to reduce the amount of physical time and the frequency of times that you feel shut down when pressure hits. So the question again is, and please share in the chat, where do you think you fall without having taken the assessment on the wall of pressure? And when that happens, right, when we experience the walls of pressure, our body does something, right? And this is what the assessment shows you, and the program that I'm building, the workshops that I do in organizations, they teach people how to first and foremost recognize the early signals. So as I mentioned, the majority of my career has actually been spent in risk management. And risk management leaders love dashboards. We love tools like this. This is why I was able to kind of whip this together real quick, because this is what I used to do for a living. And early warning signals was something that we really leaned into as risk management leaders and process management leaders. What is the signal that will show me that something is about to break, so that I can hopefully catch it before the break happens? Organizations spend billions, trillions of dollars standing up early warning signal reports and information for processes. And one day it dawned on me, why are we not doing this for ourselves? Why don't we have mechanisms to show us, whoa, something's happening in my body. My shoulders are tight. My jaw is tight. My chest is tight. I'm not breathing as deep as I normally do. But then also, what's happening in the mind? What are my thoughts thinking? I am someone that really gets stuck in what I call what if loops. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? I overthink, I overanalyze. I am someone that will replay a conversation to death. And past romantic relationship, people that I've been in romantic relationships will affirm this. It can be, I have a risk, I'll say it this way, I have a risk of not letting things go. And there are specific reasons for that, right? That I am now able to understand and articulate because I do the work, because I do the inner audit framework on myself often. And so now I can notice, whoa, my mind is future tripping. I'm thinking about what could go wrong. I got this negative, what I see as a negative performance review. This could impact my money. This could impact my job. This could impact my reputation. All these things could go wrong. I am suddenly bracing for the worst in my body and in my thoughts. And then what's happening in my behavior? I'm bracing for the worst in my behavior. I am preparing that 10-page email, with my case. I did mock, what they call it, mock trials when I was in high school. We pretended to be lawyers because at one point I thought I was going to become an attorney. And so, I guess maybe that training kicks in sometimes. And instead of just accepting things as they are, seeing feedback as a gift, not a curse, again, whether it's professional or personal, instead of being clear, being calm, being steady, being mature, right? Let's just keep it real, because a lot of this has to do with just straight up old-fashioned maturity. Instead of doing that, even I, Shawntà, the mindfulness, person, still have a risk of getting stuck in overreaction, over communication, overthinking, and sometimes, because I can be combination shut down or speed up, or just shutting down, avoiding, becoming passive aggressive, not saying the thing that is needed to be said. What I also call this, I came up with a term to help me. I like numbers, as you can see. I'm a quantitative person, but somebody told me this once, that sometimes when we are, locked into pressure, we do what is sometimes called, we put a 10 on a 2, right? Our reaction is a 10, but the scenario is a 2. And it's really simple. And I want you to remember that language and maybe write it down. 10 on 2. Is this scenario, is my behavior, is my reaction a 10 on a 2? Or the opposite, right? Sometimes something can happen that is actually a 10. This is something that, someone has violated your boundaries, someone has been disrespectful, and you get to decide this, by the way. Like, it's not for anyone else to decide what is a 10 for you, what is a 2 for you. This is the work that I really want to teach people, is how to actually gain the self-governance and the self-awareness to be able to know where you are on the scale, on the meter. But sometimes your behavior is a 2, but the scenario is a 10. Right? That's that avoidance and shutdown behavior. So, being able to notice when you're putting a 10 on a 2 or when you're putting a 2 on a 10, and really noticing that so that you can then calibrate, so that you can then do the thing to actually get your energy, your nervous system to a place where your behavior matches the scenario. And not even just matches the scenario, matches your intended outcome. So going back to my feedback scenario, right? I got feedback. This is my first manager role. It's very, I think expected that there's going to be some developmental feedback. In that case, I would say that was absolutely a 2-level situation. But in that moment, my response was a 10. If only I had something that could help me see that, allow me to calibrate, and then allow me to respond with my refined, calibrated energy. And that thing is the inner audit. And so what I want to do now is I want to actually show you, I did the inner, when I was like thinking about this session, I put together the inner audit framework for this particular scenario. And if you've been with me, you know that my framework, the inner audit, is catching, diagnosing, and converting. Catching the moment, catching the pattern, diagnosing it with, going back to risk management, what's called 5 why analysis. Asking why 5 times, and understanding, what the root cause is under pressure, and then then converting that energy with a clarity protocol, with a practice, something that will interrupt the pattern, interrupt the default behavior, the thing that you're wired for, because of a variety of reasons. And the 5 why is really good at helping you kind of understand like why, if you're someone that really kind of needs the why, and maybe you don't, maybe you only need 1 why, maybe you can go straight, maybe catch is enough to regulate your nervous system. Again, you get to decide this, but frameworks help us, kind of have a container for the practice. And so when I think back to my feedback scenario, which, I'm just going to kind of read some of this, the trigger, I received corrective or negative feedback from someone whose opinion mattered. And again, I want you to think about this from your own perspective as I'm saying this out loud. Maybe it's not work. Think about the last time your partner gave you negative, what you saw as negative feedback. Think about the last time you had to provide, feedback to someone and they responded in a way that represented a trigger or survival mode. Think about the last time this had happened in a professional or personal relationship. The immediate perception, for me was, this isn't just information about something I did. It feels like information about who I am, right? I have suddenly made this about my identity, and that's the trap. That's the trap. When you're someone that is the oldest, that is the responsible one, that, went to Hampton University and graduated magna cum laude and was always on point and always got good grades and got the good job and was always rewarded for achievement. Sometimes the downside of that is that you will now be wired for perfection. And so anything that happens in your life that is not a reflection of that perfection suddenly becomes a threat, and it activates a pattern loop. Feedback arrives, you identify it as a threat, you prove and explain, you get some temporary relief, right? Especially if, if you're a part of, other groups of very smart people. I remember at the time that this feedback scenario happened, I was around a lot of people and there was a lot of rhetoric praising being petty. Does anybody remember that era where like petty was cool? It's like the more petty you could be on social media, the cooler you were, the funnier you were. There were like secret groups of smart people, Black nerds, and of all races, people that were just always like kind of talking behind people's back and being petty, right? And so what do you do in this, you get the temporary relief, and maybe you go to someone that can validate it, right? That can, confirm your bias. I would do that too sometimes. And then the cycle would just repeat. right? And like I said, the ultimate where it ended up was me. Ultimately, I ended up losing my job. Again, not necessarily because of this scenario, but everything kind of adds up to this loop contributing to that. And sometimes it's hard to see this when you're in it. And this is why the tools, the assessment that I created, and I'll drop the links to all of these, the ways that you can kind of start to rewire these patterns over time so that you don't get stuck as long. The tools help you kind of identify your bias and be that interruption so that you don't just do what you always do. It took me a long time to get to this though, right? And so what's happening underneath, just catching this is really the act of catching is just sometimes voice noting and or going into AI saying, in this case, I got some negative feedback. I'm ready to see this as a threat, but let me pause, right? And getting some non-biased perspective. That's catching. And then diagnosing. I did the 5 whys on myself for this scenario. And it can actually get kind of deep. It can get kind of deep to kind of understand why we show up the way we do, right? Why do I default to shutting down, or why do I default to being anxious or being a litigator? And so like 5 why, by the way, if you don't know, 5 why comes from Six Sigma. Six Sigma is a process management framework that was actually created at Motorola back in, I think, the 80s. Don't quote me on the year, a long time ago. And it was designed to help manufacturing processes understand why something on an assembly line broke, right? Because the habit, what Motorola executives found is that what people would do when something broke, you imagine the conveyor belt, something breaks, they would just fix the thing and then send the thing back down. And then it would break again. And they would just fix the thing and then they would send it back down. And some smart person said, wait a minute, we keep spending all this money fixing. Well, we've never actually sat down and asked why it keeps breaking. And so someone came up with this amazing framework called Six Sigma, which was a toolbox of these tools to help you actually, save money in processes and understand why things break and, start to apply fixes in a way that lasts. And so again, when I really, got into the work that I do, started to think about how does that connect to us as our lived experience as human beings, right? Why don't we do that more often? Why don't we ask ourselves why more often? And so I'm going to run the 5 whys on myself, going back to the same feedback. Why do I become defensive? I'm being real personal with y'all, so I hope y'all appreciate my vulnerability. Why do I become defensive when I receive negative feedback? Because I experience some feedback as an accusation, not neutral data. I react to the meaning I attach, not just the message. Right. And so put a 1 in the chat every time something resonates, as I read these whys off for myself. And again, it doesn't have to just be feedback as it relates to work. It could be anything. It could be the moment where any moment where you find yourself getting overly defensive about something. Right. So if you can relate to that first why, drop a 1 in the chat. The second why does a gap in my performance feel like a gap in me? Because competence became closely connected to my identity. I equated performance with worth. And you know what? This is really common for anyone that identifies as like a other, anyone in a diverse group, anyone that, is maybe been told you got to work twice as hard to get half as far, right? Is that a relatable phrase? Drop a yes in the chat if you can relate to that. You have to work twice as hard to get half as far. You have to be damn near perfect. Otherwise, you lose power, you lose momentum, you lose. Well, if you've been told that your whole life, guess what? Your nervous system is now wired for that, whether it's necessary or not. And guess what, my friend? You are now in survival mode. What is survival mode? Survival mode is the neurological and physiological state where you are in a fight, flight, freeze. It's the moment where the brain does certain things to protect you, to keep you safe. But getting a couple bullet points of feedback is not something to necessarily have you stuck in your survival mode tendencies where you're ready to fight or you're ready to freeze or you're ready to flee. But that's what, this competence, this obsession with competence and this obsession with performance can do to us and do to our nervous systems. Why 3? Why did competence become such an important source of safety? Because my environment taught me that being prepared and having receipts was protection. Just a little clarity. Again, I'm the oldest daughter. My bonus father is military. My mother worked in banking. So, I grew up in Detroit in the 80s and 90s. Everything about my upbringing actually kind of aligns to this idea that protection, safety, preparation are paramount, even when it's not as important as it needs to be, even when it locks me in a physical state of stress that is now harming me, even when it puts me in a place where I'm putting a 10 on a 2, right? And so, competence became my armor, adaptive, and still activated in the present moment, even though it doesn't need to be activated. Why didn't that strategy naturally disappear once I became successful? And I would add, once I became safe, because it kept working. Everyone else around me is doing it. Everyone else is stuck in survival mode. Everyone else's nervous systems are, especially the people I'm around, because that's what we do. Confirmation bias. We find other people that will, sort of mirror our behavior. I was around a lot of people that were defensive, a lot of people that take things personal, a lot of people that avoid hard conversations. So my environment continued to reinforce my nervous system state, and therefore it keeps working, right? Or at least my perception is that it keeps working. And seemingly it did. I continued to climb the corporate ladder. I made it to vice president of, my last corporate role. My title was vice president, sales process governance, Fortune 100 bank for the whole sales organization. I was in charge of the whole governance function. So there were aspects of it where it was working, but guess what? I was overweight. My face was a reflection of stress. I had acne. I I had conflict way more than I needed to because I was just constantly stuck in that mode. And the brain doesn't retire a strategy that has been rewarded. The nervous system doesn't retire what you continue to do. It only retires what you interrupt. And I didn't interrupt it, until I found meditation, very honestly. The last why does the pattern still fire around feedback now? And it does sometimes, not as much. I think now I have kind of relaxed into feedback. I truly do embody the motto that feedback is a gift, not a curse. Now, where it is still sometimes a struggle is in personal relationships, I'll be honest. Work-wise, I can usually like receive, acknowledge, just want to grow, just want to get better. But sometimes, when it hits that nerve, when it hits that thing that really is my identity is attached to, this still comes up for me. And I think that's really something I want to relay. This is not about like curing patterns. This is not about curing the way you show up when pressure hits. This is not about eliminating pressure. This is first and foremost about understanding yourself with greater clarity. Because when you understand yourself, you can actually do something to change the behavior into behavior that is aligned with who you are desiring to be. And you get to pick that. I get a little annoyed by all the social media posts that are constantly telling people, you don't need this, you need this. You don't need that, you need this. And it's usually this is usually whatever they're selling, right? Like, and that's all cool, like, and everything. But at the end of the day, to me, what works best is the inner work. That's why this is called the inner audit. Do you know what you need? Do you know why you show up the way you do? Do you know why, in my case, root cause, corrective feedback can activate an old equation where being wrong, misunderstood, or imperfect threatens my identity as competent. Proving is the strategy I learned to restore safety, control, and self-definition. That's the root cause for me sometimes. And I can understand why, because again, I really do the work on myself. So if this is resonating, please let me know in the chat. Drop a 1 in the chat. Drop in the chat your version of this. It's really important for us to see how this shows up, and for you to even kind of document how this shows up in your life. Not only can that, putting that in the chat help yourself kind of express is something that maybe you've never expressed before, but someone else bearing witness to that now has deeper understanding as well. And beyond just the words that I'm sharing, we are here co-creating this experience together. And so the more you share, the more the experience benefits everyone in the room. So that was diagnosing. And I have a GPT. It's called the Inner Audit GPT that I'm going to, drop in the chat later in the experience that does this for you. You actually just type in your, and I'll move it to the screen just so you can see it for those that haven't seen it before. But you just type in the chat or in the GPT what your problem is, right? I got some negative feedback. I'm ready to pop off. And then it'll do, I'll just do that real quick. All right. Yeah, you don't have to be perfect grammar. You can use slang, you can use it whatever you want to do. I got negative feedback. I am ready to pop off. Help. Right. Sometimes that's what we need. We need an intervention. And phoning a friend doesn't always work because, again, those default biases can sometimes have you phone a friend that'll help you just pop off more. But the Inner Audit GPT will actually run you through clarity signals. It'll run you through the 5 why. It'll help you understand the pattern. It'll help you identify the clarity control that can actually help you navigate this. But going back to my story, what I wish I had was the clarity control that I now use the most now, which is soul before story. And that's the convert in the framework. Convert that once you recognize it, once you catch it, once you understand it with the 5 why, now let's convert it. Let's do something about this energy. We don't have to stay stuck as long as we were. And music is one of my favorite ways to do this. Some of you may know this, but I'm actually doing my first TED Talk this fall, October 3rd. I'll drop the chat if you, or drop in the chat the link to actually, if you want to show up, and be in the audience, you can actually do that. But the TED Talk is actually focused on the science of soul music and how soul music is actually a tool for nervous system regulation. And before I go, we're actually going to practice this right now. Before I go into the practice, though, I want to share a little bit about what I'm actually going to be sharing in the TED Talk, the science of soul music and how soul music can activate presence in the times that you need it most. And really the theory, the big idea that I'm sharing from that stage on October 3rd is how soul music is not just entertainment, it's technology. As someone, I identify as a technologist, I've worked in technology for several years. I believe that technology is more than just screens and computers and digital. Technology is anything that helps humans live life better, essentially. It's our applied knowledge of ways to make our lives better. And soul music was actually created in the Black experience, rooted in gospel, blues, jazz, R&B, and it carries truth, emotion, and groove and rhythm. And the science of that, is really helping. In the TED Talk, I'll be speaking about the science of rhythm and groove and how with this type of music, any type of music, but I'm highlighting soul music specifically because of the way it is actually constructed, its roots in spiritual faith, and as well as the way it engages groove, which is the body, right? Rhythm is repetition. Groove is the body's response to that repetition. Groove is the body actually engaging outside of the mind, right? Because when we're stuck in a lot of these patterns, the first thing that is usually activated is our thoughts, is our mind. And so the music helps you, get out of the mind and into the body so that the mind can settle and so that focus can return. Groove interrupts the mental loop and brings you back to the now. And the neuroscience on this is very clear. There's so much research that shows how rhythmic groove activates the brain's motor and reward systems at the same time. This helps to regulate stress and emotion and rebuild focused attention, increase dopamine and motivation, strengthen memory, and will help you relax that maybe has resonance, right? Because sometimes the spa music and the sound baths, I love those things. I do those things. Sometimes I just need a little Isley Brothers. I need some Stevie Wonder. I need some Michael Jackson, Off the Wall. Y'all ever actually listen to that song, Off the Wall? That was the original title for the TED Talk, was Off the Wall, because of the lyrics. Tonight, we're going to leave our 9 to 5s on the shelf and just enjoy ourselves. Groove. Let the madness in the music get to you. Life ain't so bad at all when you live it off the wall, off the walls of pressure. I was like, wow, Mike, thanks for the alley-oop, because that's my framework, the walls of pressure. And he talking about getting off the wall, right? Getting off the walls of pressure, getting out of that stuck state, getting out of that shutdown state, getting out of that litigation state, and getting into the groove of life, getting into the rhythm of life, which can be a reminder that it's not as bad as we think it is. And so the theory that we're going to play with right now is that soul music plus mindfulness equals a science-backed space before the story. And mindfulness, I want to, make sure you understand my definition of mindfulness. Mindfulness is being in the present moment on purpose without judgment. I didn't say breath work. I didn't say spa music. I said being in the present moment on purpose without judgment. Sound is something that we can lock into in the present moment to take us out of our survival mode states. And that sound, when it elevates our mood, it elevates our energy, reduces some of that cortisol, elevates our dopamine, relaxes our amygdala, activates our prefrontal cortex. It's like all systems are suddenly a go, simply because you listened to a song that had rhythm, groove, and was created with intention to elevate your vibration. So before we do the practice, I am going to just pause and see if there are any questions. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat and see if you guys have any questions. And just pause, take a quick sip of my tea. Any questions before we go into the practice? And yes, Omar, soul music, the soul music part is extremely interesting. For years, maybe decades, I've always have jazz playing in my office. When you come in, no matter what the topic, it has always helped me create the space of conversation for anyone coming in. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is the key. Surround your environment. How can you create an environment that is a reflection of the vibration that you want? That's the contribution that soul music can have to your environment. One of my favorite soul music songs is the Isley Brothers, At Your Best, You Are Love. And the good thing about listening to music mindfully is that you get to listen to lyrics with more presence. You actually get to notice how it could, maybe transform your point of view. Because in that song, which is a soul song, it's typically seen as a love song. Shout out to Aaliyah for remaking it. But in the song, they say, at your best, you are love. You're a positive, motivating force within my life. Should you ever feel the need to wonder why, let me know. I listen to that song sometimes and I pretend like I'm seeing like my wisest, most, honorable elder saying that to me, reminding me that when I'm at my best, I'm loved. So let me just tap into that. All right, so let's do a quick practice. I'm going to put on a song that is, I think I'm actually going to do the Michael Jackson. Y'all want to groove to a little Michael Jackson? Yeah, I'm seeing some head nods. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Because I can't do it in a TED Talk because of copyright, stuff. So this will give me a chance to do it here. All right, so here is your instruction. Because you've probably never listened to Michael Jackson, this song, the way that we're getting ready to. What is the name of the song you mentioned earlier? There were a couple I mentioned. One, At Your Best, You Are Loved, the Isley Brothers. The other one, I don't remember, but it'll come back to me. So I stay on track. I am going to just go ahead and play our song. What I want you to do is get into a comfortable position. Feel free to keep your camera on, for those that have the camera on, feel free to keep it on. And what we're going to do is I think this song is 4 minutes long. So hang out with me for 4 minutes. We got into the top of the hour. So I'm going to put the song on. It is the song Off the Wall. And what I want you to do is listen to it in a way that you maybe have never listened to it before. Notice what the music does to your body. Maybe you want to move. Nobody's judging you. Everybody's eyes are closed. Okay. So no one's looking at you. No one cares what you're doing. Focus on yourself. Do what comes natural to you. If your eyes are closed and you want to start snapping and bopping, do what you do. But when your mind starts to wander, your mind's going to go to wherever it goes. You're going to think about things you got to do later. You're going to think about the things you had to do before this. Your mind's going to do what it does. You're not doing anything wrong. You're being a human being. Allow that and accept it. Just allow the music to bring you back. The music is the thing that matters most in this moment. And there's lots of things happening in the music. There's sound, there's lyrics, there's instruments. Maybe there's an instrument that sounds interesting. Put your attention on it. There's drums, there's guitars, there's bass, there's lyrics. Find one of those things, try to lock into that, and then notice how you feel. Okay? All right. Go ahead and get comfortable. Allow your hands to rest, just softly on your lap. Uncross your legs, uncross your arms, get a little loose, maybe shake out some of that energy. And for the next 4 minutes, just allow yourself to groove with Michael Jackson in a way that he actually intended this song to be received, which is with presence. And I'll bring you back when the song is over. Enjoy. Close your eyes and just sink into the moment. All right, with your eyes still closed, just take a moment to notice how you feel right now. Before you open your eyes, before we come back into the space, I invite you to take a couple of deep breaths just to kind of integrate the vibration that Michael Jackson set for us. Keep breathing in through the nose and out the mouth. Breathing in the rhythm, exhaling the pressure, breathing in the groove, releasing the parts of us that are overreactive or underreactive. Notice how you feel. And if you feel good, smile. Turn your thoughts to gratitude, to yourself, to every artist that contributed to that incredible song, reminding us that life doesn't have to be as hard as we perceive it to be in these moments where we get stuck. That we do have tools and we do have options and we do have choices, and we are grateful for them. And so it is. When you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes and please share in the chat. How did that feel? What came up? What did you notice? Did you move your body? Did you find yourself dancing? Did you find yourself grooving? Did you notice anything about the lyrics that maybe you had never noticed before? And feel free to come off chat. I'll pick on some of y'all. Hey, Justina. Hey, Natasha. Hey, Omar. Hey, Damien, my regulars. What's up, y'all?
Okay. I'll
Somebody
go
come off
off
mute and tell me
chat.
how that felt. Thank
I'll tell
you.
you how I felt. You can hear me, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
It was relaxing, but in a different sort of way. Because my eyes were closed, I wasn't as tempted to move as much as I
Hmm.
would.
Hmm.
Um, but it felt very grounding
Yes.
and like
Yes.
a good distraction from everything else that I have going on right now. And I took the time to listen to a lot of the ad libs and the sounds that he made. I know all the words because I love this song, but I never paid attention to a lot of the little inflections and little things that
Yeah.
happen in between the verses, and that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a fun listen. It's a fun song to listen to. I invite you to carry that into your day, and I'm actually going to be activating a 30-day experience starting at the end of October. It's called the Inner Audit, Moving Beyond Survival Mode. And we are going to do practices and experiments that allow us to sort of receive what you just said, Natasha, sound, movement, and stillness in ways that we currently don't, right? And the intention is to help us move out of these moments of people pleasing and stuck and proving and all of these things and utilizing tools that actually move us into clarity, calm, choice, like the things that you just described you felt in that experience. It's a 30-day experience, and we'll meet weekly Thursday evenings to have experiences like this that ground us. I'm so glad you mentioned how grounding the sound was, because that is absolutely what you need in these moments of pressure. You need to know how to ground yourself. You need to know how to return back to the experience of knowing that you got this, right? Pressure will change our perception and have us thinking that everything that could go wrong will go wrong. But the reality is that at some point we can come back to understanding that we don't have to stay stuck in survival mode. We can actually move and groove our way back to a different feeling and change. Like Damien said, you change the way I hear the song, how it makes me feel. Good distraction, yes. And so the form is in the chat. I invite you to take a quick second to just fill out this very short form. It only asks like 4 questions. So click the link in the chat, or if you need to scan the QR code on the screen, you can do that as well. One thing I'll also add is for the 30-day experience will be 4 virtual experiences, but it'll culminate with a farmhouse retreat at the Little Feminist Farm in Stockbridge, Georgia. It'll be a half-day experience. If you sign up for, the virtual part, you'll actually get complimentary access to the full day experience. I know some of you guys are out of state. It will be worth the travel into Atlanta for this experience, to just experience what it feels like to learn how to navigate these experiences and to actually have a container to practice that which we weren't taught to practice. Have someone that can guide you through this, especially if you feel like you are experiencing survival mode more than ever. Life is changing. I'm talking to people all the time that are, changing jobs, getting laid off, starting new relationships, ending relationships, going through divorce, going through empty nesting, going through caretaking and caregiving, grandparents and parents aging and children acting crazy and spouses acting crazy, all these things. Oh, did I just hit a nerve with, I see. Yeah, all of that, right? Sometimes all of the above at once, right? Hence the spiral, right? This is how life can feel, and I'm not immune to this. Like, I do this work because it helps me. And as it helps me, I help others. So I would love, this is a small cohort. I'm only having a couple, a small group of people in this experience. It is absolutely open to men and women, non-binary, anyone, whatever you identify as, you are welcome in this space to learn how to navigate out of survival mode states and into clarity. So that we can, move out of survival mode more than we need to. Survival mode exists for a reason, and we want to stay safe. We want to be able to survive this life, but we also want to know how to thrive. And there is access to that, and that's what we're going to be practicing. And so, going back to the sound, one of the experiments that we're going to do is taking a song like Off the Wall, and I'll have a playlist. You'll get access to my high vibration playlist that I've been curating forever. And I will give you certain experiments to do within the week that will allow you to listen to sounds and listen to music in different ways and then document how you feel. And do that in a repetitive way over 30 days. You'll be doing something like every day, right? Thank you again. I have to drop. Okay. So yes, so please fill out that form. Let me know. And if you're interested, then we'll set up some time and I can tell you more about the experience. So before we close out, I want to just pause this. I'll stop sharing my screen. And I also want to say that I bring this to organizations too. So this experience, this is an example of a pressure-proof experience that I do as workshops, as keynotes. I'm actually doing Leading Off the Wall for the Georgia Apartment Association, keynoting their annual conference. In a few weeks, we are going to move and groove to some Michael Jackson. Shout out to Mike Jackson, who's on the call as well. Did y'all know Mike was on the call? Hey, Mike. I didn't plan that. But that's how these things work. When you allow yourself to elevate your vibration, you make room for coincidences. You make room for the moments where life just suddenly fits. The rhythm and the groove locks in, and your life is a reflection of that. I am happy to say that that is my life. Most of the time, I don't feel stuck in survival mode, but I do the work. I do a lot of work. I am constantly challenging my default patterns and transforming my behavior using the frameworks that I teach. And so I want to pause just to see if there are any questions. Maybe you're navigating something that you can use some perspective on. Maybe it's a work thing. Maybe it's a personal thing. Feel free to ask me any questions that you might have. Maybe you have some questions about meditation, because that often happens as well. People have questions about meditation, and I am here for the next 5 minutes to really just answer any of the questions that you may have before we get released back into the wild, right? We have 5 more minutes, so feel free to come off mute or just even share how this experience was for you. So I welcome anything in the chat or for anyone to come off mute and just share what resonated and any questions that you might have.
I'm gonna pop off quickly because I need to drop off very quickly, but this is really helpful. I have a lot going on. You know a lot that I have going on, and this was a very welcome break in the craziness of the day. So I just want to say thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for being here and showing up for yourselves. One question that I get a lot that I'll ask or I'll answer is like, how do I get started with meditation? Right? Like, I want to do it. I don't think I can do it right. My mind doesn't do that. Like, I don't think I'm good at it. I get that question a lot. And one thing that I just want to say that is often helpful is that so much of you being good at meditation, right? It goes back to that pattern, right? Of wanting to perform and wanting to be competent. You're seeing meditation as something to achieve. It's not. The first step at making meditation a habit is to first reframe your perspective on it. It is simply a space to practice being aware. The more you practice, the better you get at things. Any people that play sports or have played sports on the call, right? How do you get better at your sport? practice. Practice isn't a space for perfection. It is a space to practice. That is what meditation it is. It's a space to practice coming back to yourself, because life takes us out of that. And so if we don't practice it, then we don't get into the habit of it. And the neurological research says that the more you do it consistently, the most famous research is 8 weeks, 20 minutes a day. Obviously, if you don't meditate, 20 minutes can seem like a mountain. And so that's why starting with songs like a 5-minute song, a 4-minute, that song was 4 minutes long, right? That counts, because you were intentional about being in the present moment, concentrating on this, on what you were hearing, and then noticing how you felt. 5 becomes 10, 10 becomes 15, 15 becomes 20, and then maybe someday you're teaching it to others, right? That's usually how it goes. So we're going to be doing a lot of these in the community in the 30-day experience to challenge our comfort zones, because the real reason I'm creating this experience is someone that has invested a lot in personal and professional development, gone to the classes, read the books, writing the books coming out Q1 next year. What I find what people need most is integration. They need to know, how do I actually integrate what I learned, integrate all this insight and this knowledge and this wisdom into my life? Because guess what, guys? Insight and knowledge is not change. It's just information. Information only becomes wisdom when it's applied. And I'll close this out with a short story. Shout out to my son, Amir. One day, picture it. I love Golden Girls. Picture it. 2 years ago, I'm giving my son a bath. He, in his school, was learning about wisdom. Out of nowhere, he asked me, Mom, do you know what wisdom means? I say, it's like kind of caught me off guard. Like, I do, but I don't know how to say it right now. And I said something like, I think it's smart something. He's like, that's not what wisdom is. Very matter of factly. I said, okay, well, what's wisdom? He said, wisdom is knowing what's right and doing it. I said, knowing what's right and doing it. Uh-huh. So me being the intellectual that I am, I had to look it up, because I wasn't going to let this well, I guess he was about six or seven at the time. I wasn't about to let this kid stand my knowledge up. So I looked it up on my phone. Definition that came up was, wisdom is application of knowledge typically gained over time. It's like, damn. How does he know that? How do you know that? He said, we're learning it in class. I said, wow. And we had this whole philosophical conversation about wisdom, right? And I leave you with that, because wisdom is knowing and doing. Likely, you know, the doing is what's difficult. So if doing is a struggle, join me in 30-day experience. We're going to learn how to do it together. We're going to understand ourselves, and we're going to have a vibe at the farmhouse retreat later this fall, where we can get in the ground and do all the things that we do to make our lives better. So with that being said, I will send you on about your day. Have an incredible day. Have an incredible rest of the week. Listen to Off the Wall. That's your challenge. Consider this day one of the Inner Audit. I want you to listen to the song Off the Wall at least one time this week between now and Sunday. Headphones on, preferably good quality headphones or a good quality surround sound system. Close your eyes, sit up straight, and allow the music to let it take you somewhere. And bonus points if you put it on repeat. Listen to it twice. First time in stillness. Second time, allow yourself to move your body. Triple bonus 3 times. First time in stillness, second time light movement, third time get up and actually move with the music as if everyone is watching you or no one is watching you, whatever is your preference. I prefer everyone to watch me. So that's what I imagine. But if you don't want anybody to watch you, then don't let anybody watch you. But take Michael Jackson's advice to heart. Move, groove, let the madness and the rhythm get to you. Life ain't so bad at all when you live it off the wall. Peace, y'all.